At 12:03 a.m., someone began pounding on my front door. Not knocking. Pounding. 3 violent blows shook the old wooden frame hard enough to wake me from a dead sleep. Then came a voice I recognized immediately. "Open the door, old man." My son-in-law. I sat upright in bed and stared at the clock. 12:03 a.m. For a moment, I wondered whether something had happened to my daughter. My name is Robert Hayes. I was 69 years old, and for 41 years I had owned Hayes Industrial Supply, a company I started with 1 delivery truck, $600 in savings, and more confidence than common sense. By the time I reached retirement age, we employed nearly 200 people. But none of that mattered as I hurried downstairs that night. Only one thought mattered. Is Caroline safe? Caroline was my only daughter. She married Eric Dalton 4 years earlier. I had never completely trusted him. Eric was charming when he needed something and cold when he didn't. He joined my company 18 months after marrying Caroline, supposedly because he wanted to learn the family business. Within 2 years, he was asking me when I planned to retire. Then he started asking who would control my shares after I died. I should have paid more attention. 3 weeks before that midnight visit, my accountant discovered irregularities in several company transactions. Nothing enormous. Not at first. A payment to a supplier I didn't recognize. A consulting fee nobody could explain. Then another. When I questioned Eric, he smiled. Probably bookkeeping mistakes. But my accountant didn't smile. Neither did the man who was staying in my guest room that night. Another thunderous blow struck the door. "Robert!" I reached the hallway and switched on the porch light. Through the narrow glass beside the door, I saw Eric. He wasn't alone. 2 large men stood behind him wearing dark jackets. Eric held a thick folder beneath one arm. I kept the chain locked. "What are you doing here?" He raised the folder. "Finishing something you should have finished months ago." "What is that?" He pulled several documents from the folder and pressed them against the glass. Even backwards, I recognized the company logo. My stomach tightened. "What do you want?" Eric smiled. "Your signature. At midnight?" "Tonight." One of the men stepped closer. I looked at Eric. "Where's Caroline?" His smile disappeared. "She's fine. Let me speak to her." "You'll speak to her after you sign." That was when fear turned into something colder. "Sign what?" Eric lifted the documents again. "Transfer of controlling interest." I stared at him. He wanted my company. Not someday. Not through inheritance. Tonight. I reached for my phone. Eric noticed. His fist slammed against the glass. "Don't make this difficult." Then he shouted, "Sign these tonight, old man." My hand froze on the door. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I had almost forgotten I wasn't alone. Slow footsteps approached from the dark hallway. Then a calm voice said, "Robert, don't open that door." I turned. The man who had spent the previous 3 nights studying my company's financial records was standing behind me. He looked through the glass at Eric. Then he quietly held out his hand. "Let me open it." And when Eric finally saw who was standing beside me, the papers in his hand began to shake. Eric's face changed instantly. The arrogance disappeared. So did the anger. For several seconds, he simply stared through the glass. Mr. Whitmore. The man beside me was Daniel Whitmore. To most people at Hayes Industrial Supply, Daniel was simply the quiet attorney who had handled our contracts for more than 20 years. But Eric knew something most employees didn't. Daniel wasn't just my attorney. When my company nearly collapsed during the recession, Daniel had invested his own money to keep 87 employees from losing their jobs. In return, he became a minority shareholder. More importantly, every major ownership transfer required his legal approval. Daniel unlocked the chain. I grabbed his arm. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Very." Then he opened the door. Cold midnight air rushed into the hallway. Eric immediately stepped backward. Daniel looked at the 2 men behind him. "Gentlemen, before anyone enters this house, I suggest you understand exactly what you're participating in." One man frowned. "We're just here to witness a business agreement." "At 12 o'clock in the morning?" Neither answered. Daniel looked at Eric. "Show me the papers." Eric pulled them against his chest. "They're between Robert and me." "No." Daniel replied calmly. "They're between Hayes Industrial Supply and anyone attempting to obtain controlling interest in it." Eric's jaw tightened. "You don't have authority over this anymore." Daniel almost smiled. "That's interesting." He reached into his robe pocket and removed his phone. "Because according to the shareholder agreement you apparently forgot to read, I do." Eric looked at me. "Robert, don't listen to him. Caroline and I are trying to protect the company." "From what?" "From you." The words hit harder than I expected. Eric continued, "You're 69. You're making mistakes. Suppliers are complaining. Employees are worried." "Which employees?" He hesitated. "That doesn't matter. It matters to me." Eric shoved the folder toward me. "Sign the papers and you'll keep 20%. You'll still receive income. You can retire comfortably." I stared at him. 41 years. Thousands of mornings arriving before sunrise. Payroll weeks when I paid employees before paying myself. Years of building something I hoped Caroline might inherit one day. And my son-in-law stood on my porch, offering me 20% of my own company. Then Daniel asked a strange question. "Eric, where did you get these documents?" Eric froze. "What?" "The documents. My attorney prepared them." "Which attorney?" Silence. Daniel held out his hand. "Give them to me." Eric refused. That was when one of the men behind him shifted uncomfortably. "Eric," he muttered, "you said these were already approved." Daniel's eyes moved toward him. "Approved by whom?" The man looked at Eric. Nobody answered. Something was wrong. And suddenly, I remembered the unexplained payments my accountant had discovered. The consulting fees, the unknown supplier. Money disappearing in amounts small enough to avoid immediate attention. Daniel had spent 3 nights at my house reviewing everything, but he hadn't told me what he'd found. I turned toward him. "Daniel?" He kept watching Eric. "Tell me." Finally, Daniel sighed. "The irregular transactions weren't bookkeeping errors." Eric's face went pale again. "How much?" I asked. "We've confirmed a little over $400,000. My stomach dropped. $400,000? Eric immediately stepped forward. "That's ridiculous." Daniel raised his phone. "I have the bank records. You accessed private accounts?" "Company accounts, Eric." Daniel's voice remained perfectly calm. "And the money didn't disappear. It moved through 3 consulting companies before reaching an account connected to you." Caroline's husband stared at him. Then at me. For the first time that night, he looked afraid. I whispered, "You stole from me?" Eric shook his head. "I moved money to protect it." "Protect it from whom?" "From bad management." Daniel interrupted. "Then why hide the transfers?" Eric said nothing. One of the 2 men stepped away from the porch. "I didn't sign up for this." Eric turned sharply. "Don't move." But the man was already walking toward his car. The second followed him. Within seconds, Eric was standing alone. No muscle, no witnesses. Just my son-in-law holding papers that suddenly looked very different. Daniel stepped onto the porch. "Those documents aren't merely transfer papers, are they?" Eric swallowed. I looked at Daniel. "What does that mean?" He turned toward me. "If you sign them, you don't simply transfer your voting shares." He paused. "You also accept responsibility for several financial transactions made during the past 18 months. My blood ran cold. "He wants me to admit I authorized the missing money." Daniel nodded. Eric's voice suddenly softened. "Robert, please, we can work this out." 10 minutes earlier I had been old man. Now I was Robert. I looked at the folder, then at him. "Does Caroline know?" He didn't answer. "Does my daughter know what you've done?" Still nothing. And that silence gave me my answer. Then headlights appeared at the end of my driveway. One vehicle. Then another. Eric turned around. 2 dark sedans slowly pulled up behind his car. He looked at Daniel. "What did you do?" Daniel calmly checked his watch. "Nothing tonight." The first car door opened. "But 3 days ago, when I discovered where the money went..." A man in a dark suit stepped out. Then a woman carrying a thick evidence case. Daniel finished his sentence. "I made a phone call." Eric backed away from the door. And for the first time since I had known him, my son-in-law looked genuinely terrified. Eric stared at the 2 vehicles as the people inside began walking toward the house. "Daniel," he whispered. What did you tell them? Daniel didn't answer him. Instead, he looked at me. Robert, there's something else you need to know. My stomach tightened. What? The $400,000 wasn't the end of it. Eric suddenly stepped forward. Don't. Daniel ignored him. He had already prepared documents showing that you voluntarily transferred control of the company to him. I looked at the papers in Eric's hands. But I never signed anything. No, Daniel said. That's why he came tonight. Everything suddenly made sense. The pounding. The two men. The midnight deadline. Eric hadn't come to negotiate. He had come because something had gone wrong with his plan. One of the investigators reached the porch. Eric Dalton. Eric said nothing. I'm Special Agent Melissa Grant. We need to speak with you regarding suspected financial fraud involving Hayes Industrial Supply. Eric immediately looked at me. Robert, listen to me. I didn't move. Caroline needs me, he continued. You really want your daughter to watch her husband get arrested? The mention of her name finally broke my silence. You came to my home at midnight with two men. I pointed toward the documents. You tried to make me sign away the company I spent 41 years building. I was trying to save it. From me? He lowered his voice. We're family. I stared at him. Family doesn't need two strangers at the door to get a signature. Eric's shoulders dropped. Then another car entered my driveway. I recognized it immediately. Caroline's. She jumped out before the engine had completely stopped. Dad! Eric's face turned white. Caroline, go home. She ignored him and ran toward me. Are you okay? I'm fine. Then she saw the investigators. Her expression changed. What is happening? Eric tried to speak, but Daniel stopped him. Caroline, your husband has been transferring company funds into accounts connected to him. She stared at Eric. No. Caroline, Hayo told me Dad was losing money. Eric said nothing. You told me the company was collapsing. Her voice cracked. Daniel quietly handed her one of the reports. She read the first page, then the second. By the third, tears were running down her face. You used me. Eric reached for her. She stepped away. The investigators took the company papers from his hands and placed them inside an evidence bag. That image stayed with me. 41 years of my life had nearly disappeared beneath one signature. But the strangest part was that I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. 6 months later, Eric pleaded guilty to multiple financial crimes connected to the company. The stolen funds were traced, and much of the money was eventually recovered. Caroline divorced him. For a while, she blamed herself. I never did. One morning, she came into my office and placed a cup of coffee on my desk. Dad. Yes? Are you still planning to retire? I smiled. Eventually. She pulled out the chair opposite me. Then teach me everything before you do. That was the moment I realized Eric had almost taken my company. But he had accidentally given me something far more valuable. My daughter finally wanted to understand why I had spent 41 years building it. And this time, I knew exactly who I wanted to leave it to.